mining. We've got 220 staff in 12 countries, so we're growing. We've got customers in over 70 countries. We have offices in more than 12 countries around the world. And basically, our business is comprehensive technology coverage for planning and operations of mining. And that includes software, training, simulation, and then consulting, which is our expert services in geology, engineering, operations, and training. So that's what we do. And one of our primary missions or objectives is integration. CAE, our parent company, has made its business in flight simulation and pilot training. But how it does that is an integrated approach where the training solution and the simulators are integrated into one package. And we'd like to take that sort of integration and apply it to the mining industry, because we believe that in the mining industry, mining operations and consulting and all mining operations will be more efficient if everything is integrated. So operations, planning data, real-time data from the field, all integrated onto a single platform. So one of the key themes to the things that we're working on today is integration. And that's why today we'd like to share with you the integration between our mine planning software and hard dollar project cost management software. So the agenda today, we're going to talk about integrating the budget and mine plan, and we're going to give you an overview of that. We did a quick intro of CAE mining software, and in a few slides we're going to talk a bit about how our software integrates into hard dollar, how to export the mine plan and schedule, and then importing the mine plan and schedule into hard dollar, and then what you can do with that information once it is in hard dollar. So to kick that off, I'm going to hand this over to Ron Babich, who's a vice president with Hard Dollar.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Ian. I appreciate that. Thanks for the intro. So I thought we'd start by, before we get into the product, I wanted to take a few seconds so that we can kind of build a mental picture of what we're trying to really accomplish with this process and focus on a few really specific areas within mining. And specifically, we're going to talk about a couple underground things today, as well as surface mines. But we're going to talk about some specific things and why this really matters, why the integration matters, and what it actually does. So hopefully, if you see my screen now, from a common workflow perspective, today you see things that come in from, whether it's Excel or some other system, a design plan or a schedule, where there's a lot of manual effort involved, where it often takes days or even weeks to make those updates into the scope that you see on the right-hand side. The scope that's included in the estimate, the scope that we report on, the scope that we measure and manage project controls with, is typically difficult for us, obviously, to keep in sync with the schedule because of all the changes that take place. In addition to changes, we have issues with escalation management, right, from a timing perspective. We have library kind of centralization issues where there's no centralized library. There's no version control when you do it from a spreadsheet perspective because you have multiple spreadsheets. And from a scope perspective, there's no scope-time connection, which takes kind of forever to hook up. What we're going to look at in a few seconds is how do you do that where we can literally tie those things together, automate it, and make it so that it's not a time-consuming effort like all of the general challenges listed on the left. Eliminate the time consumption. Make it so it's not manual anymore. Avoid the high risk of error because we're going to depend on the system to know what changes took place instead of trying to memorize or match them up side by side. Bring a database into this thing so that we're not dealing with spreadsheets. Create a lot more visibility into it so that it's centralized, that 1 or 100 people can now look at it, and then create that collaboration from that. Okay, so that's the issue there. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to create the to-be state here. So with this two systems together, with CAE coupled with Hard Dollar, we're going to take what used to take like days or weeks and turn it into minutes. we're also going to make a direct connection between scope and schedule so that they're linked at the hip together. When a scope item changes or a schedule item changes, those updates are going to happen together, which will help us make some decisions here in just a moment. There's a true value there that comes from connecting scope and the schedule with the budget, providing us immediate answers to what-if questions, not just things that have happened or will happen, but what if this happens or what if that happens, helping us identify potential scope changes when they occur or in the planning stages. The last one is really just facilitating the database scope, understanding that we're going to have a database now that's going to manage all this information, and we don't have to run around with 100 different spreadsheets. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll kind of show you what I mean specifically about what we're talking about. So here's a great example. I've got a resource or a set of resources that is attached to an activity that has consequences of change, and what does it mean when those things change, and how many decisions do I have to make, and how hard is that to track? So let's just walk through it from the beginning. Let's pretend, for example, that we may have, and I mentioned here my little balloon here, I've got 2,000 activities, or I can have one activity. It really doesn't matter. But if I had multiple activities to manage, it just multiplies this whole process that many more times a week, that many more times a month. So for each activity that I have, and let's pretend, for example, I've got a resource that is attached to something that I need to do at a WBS level. The total cost of the activity is $865,000, and I'm planning on finishing this work by 12/15/2014 using the set of resources that I have down below. What does this mean to life as we know it? So I've got 3 resources attached. The first 2 resources are a duration-based resource. One of the resources we're going to use to 2014, the other resource we're going to use to 2013, and the other C resource we're going to use to that same point in time. Except the C resources, we're going to drive it by the number of meters that we're doing, so we basically cost per meter there, and the other 2 resources are basically a cost per day. We're going to focus on those cost per day resources right now, and we're going to see how that affects the schedule change. So as we get into this process, and what we're going to look at here just a minute between CAE and hard dollar is, I may make duration changes that are going to elongate so that when those changes occur, there's a direct proportion to cost change that will occur in the scope that are affected by that schedule. So for every activity I have, I might have 2 resources that change accordingly on cost as well too. Go to the next slide. So in this particular example, I might have a cash flow consequence because of that. So you take that same activity, I had an old date that I originally planned on ending on 12/15/2014. Now I find out that that activity is going to go a heck of a lot longer, and I've got it going all the way out to 2018. The old date was 2014, the new date was 2018. So suddenly the resources down below, those resource A and resource B, are now going to be affected because I need those things too. And from an automatic perspective, the duration of that activity now is going to affect my cost because I've got 4 additional years and 4 additional years added to those resources. Okay, awesome. Let's go to the next slide. I'm already saving time. Life is a lot better for me. So I've got my resources going on. I've got my cash flow updated, and let's hit the next slide. Okay? Fantastic. So frequency of updates, how often does it happen? So if I've got resources that are being affected by schedule that happen all the time, one of the things that we hear about every week is how much time does this take me to do? Because we were looking at one example, but if you look at it here from a work breakdown structure, there's hundreds of these. So imagine doing that hundreds upon hundreds of time, keeping up with those resource needs as they change. And in some of the examples I kind of listed here as to what those things could be. So under that roof, as I kind of put up there, those time and scope updates, I might have ground type changes that are going to affect my scope, right? I may have air quality kind of changes that may force me to go from electric to diesel or vice versa from an underground perspective. I won't have weather underground, of course, but I can have it on the surface that might affect me, unless I'm in a really strange underground location. But I'm also going to have resource arrangements and equipment and labor arrangements that are going to change based on those things. So if I've got to do that all the time, life is extremely difficult if I'm trying to update that schedule to the scope. And what we're going to see here in a few minutes is how do you do that, automate it, so that we can no-brainer it and do it in minutes instead of taking a whole couple days to go figure this out. And it really is a game changer in terms of how that thing works. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Ian, and Ian's going to talk a little bit about that transition from how that design is going to get into the schedule. Ian, take it away. Ian's going to be joining us in
All
a
right.
second. There you go.
Here I am. So one of the things that I talked about in my introduction was the importance of integration. And one of the reasons why this is so important is because it's because of the way our customers are using mine planning software and Hard Dollar. We've got customers who are mining owners, mining companies who have mining projects that they're managing. They've got their mine design in Studio 5D Planner or Mine2 and their schedule is in EPS, which is the integrated Gantt chart scheduler that comes with Mine2 and Studio 5D Planner. And they want to do their costing in Hard Dollar, their cost estimations, and then actually track the costs of their projects. We've also got contractors and EPCMs who do the same sort of thing. They have a mine design in Mine2 that they have scheduled in EPS, and they want to put a bid together so that they can bid on this project, and then carry that on to actually doing the project and tracking the costs. And finally, there's consultancies who need to have a mine design that they are working on as part of a study. They need to provide a cash flow and a cost estimate for. So the commonality here is getting from the schedule to the cost estimation. So here's how we do it. Basically, in this first implementation of the integration, which will be released later on this month, what you do is you take your mine schedule in Mine2 or Studio 5D Planner and EPS, and we've got an interface that I'll show you in a moment that will allow you to export this into an Excel document that's properly formatted and then to import into Hard Dollar. Customers who are already using Hard Dollar with our software are doing this manually, and one of the things that they might be familiar with is that EPS has all sorts of different production fields. Because it's a mining scheduling software, you've got things in there like mine tons, you've got meters or feet, you have drill meters, backfill tons, cubic meters of paste fill, rock bolts, whatever you put in the EPS. You've got all these different quantities. Now you've got to decide which of those quantities you're actually going to cost on. Which of these quantities are important for applying costs. What the interface does is it allows you to say for which type of activities, which is the costing unit of measure, and then it will take those and export those as the costing unit of measure to Hard Dollar. So what we've done to implement this is we've added the Hard Dollar interface into EPS. So you access it from the toolbar here, and if you click on it, it will bring up this Hard Dollar interface here. This control panel is fairly straightforward. You can save a configuration and load it if you've got one already, or you can create a new one. Over here in the top section, you select which tasks you want to export. You might export all of the tasks, or you might have a certain subset of tasks that are important for costing, or you might have another subset of tasks that you just don't want to export, but you want to export everything else. So all of that is accommodated here. One of the really great things about Hard Dollar is its task rollup field. So in EPS, and especially for Mine2 and Studio 5D Planner projects, you might have a decline that has 100 segments, which are each separate tasks in EPS, but they're all decline segments, and maybe they're 5 by 5 meters, so they all might have the same costs. So what this rollup feature will do is roll all of those things up into one activity, and it uses a field, an attribute in the project in order to do that, whether it's your name field or another attribute that you've defined manually in EPS, so that you don't import 100 different items into your cost breakdown structure for that one decline. Then you determine the default costing unit of measure. So in this case, we've selected meters because most of the activities in this mine are going to be costed on meters of development. However, we have these exceptional costing units of measure. For example, tonnage costing, ounces costing, I just put in there as an example, but I don't know how anyone would actually use that. But basically, if you've got stopes that you're mining or a large excavation, you want to cost that on the number of tons you're getting out of there, you can do that. Another option is drilling or backfill. If you've got a cost per drill meter or a cost per cubic meter of backfill, you can assign a filter for that and then the unit of measure. And those filters are filters that you've actually created in EPS. So this interface is completely with EPS. Another feature that we're going to implement is revenue, and this is just going to help balance out the cash flow. So you will be able to export your revenue field from EPS if you're using it, and then you'll be able to see that as a pay item in hard dollar to show when you're getting paid in your cash flow of the project. Finally, hard dollar has the ability to allow you to add tags and other user-defined data to each item in the cost breakdown structure. So at the bottom part of this interface, we give you the opportunity to specify certain EPS attributes that you're going to export to these hard dollar fields. When you're done, you can save the configuration and use it again. But basically, you just hit the export button. And oh, look at all these handy notes. Anyway, you hit the export button, and it exports the data to hard dollar, to that Excel file, which is then very easy, as you're about to see, to import into hard dollar. This is what the Excel file looks like. Basically, you've got your filtered tasks that you're exporting. This second column, or the third column, column C, is the roll-up field. So everything with the same name here, for example, these three tasks that are DD11W will be rolled up into one item in the cost breakdown structure. Then you've got your description, your start and finish dates, the quantity of the costing unit of measure, what that unit is. You can export your revenue here, and then the additional optional fields that you can export as tags to hard dollar. So once you've done that, the next step is to import it into hard dollar, and I'm going to throw it back from the snowy northern British Columbia down to sunny Arizona, so hard dollar can take you through that process.
Yeah, excellent, Ian. This is Ryan with Hard Dollar, and yes, I'll take over from here, continuing with using the slides as kind of talking points to help everyone understand how this interaction between the two systems takes place. I'll continue with these slides, but rest assured we are going to be going through the process live in the product here in a couple minutes. So thank you for your patience. And so moving forward here, now that the export has taken place out of 5D Planner and it is in Excel format, Hard Dollar, within Hard Dollar, we make it very easy for you to just simply point and click at that data source, being the Excel file, and bringing that right into Hard Dollar and dropping that into your cost breakdown structure. So the following slide there, which is showing some of the process to activate that window to then define the mapping. In this particular window here, it's really giving you that opportunity to map fields from the EPS Excel dump and associate those fields with the columns and fields inside of Hard Dollar. So a very simple type approach. The nice thing about this is that as you go through the mapping process, if you're because the dump from EPS is pretty standard, the format it comes out in. If that is a standard format, then going through this mapping process, you do it once, you save it, you don't have to do it again. Of course, unless you want to bring in more information, which then manipulates that format. But with that said, moving on from there, what is it that happens now that we've mapped that and we're bringing the information in? As Ian mentioned, whether you're in EPS, they're representing maybe a drift or a decline, and it can be represented in 100 different activities. Whereas through this activity of bringing the information into hard dollar, what we do is we associate and see that of those, let's say, 25 drift activities that all roll up to drift DD10W, well, we'll roll all that up, summarize it in a single line item in hard dollar, but also capture the quantities by period, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. So we're not losing the schedule and the production over time. We're just simply summarizing it at a one line item level in hard dollar, but representing it over its period of time, considering the production that we're bringing in from EPS and 5D Planner. And then as a result, you're going to have immediate visibility into the cost curve, as well as a number of other detailed information around the cost of your project, as well as the assigned resources and utilization, et cetera. So we'll definitely take a look at that as well.
That's something, just to mention, something I think is pretty cool, because if from a 30-year perspective or a 15-year perspective, instead of having 100,000 lines that represent different years, different periods, it really comes down to having one line that spread over by periods behind that, so that budget's there represented by period, the quantities are represented by period, but it makes the scope easy to manage because it's not a gajillion line items. You're talking about one activity, but it's just over a long-term duration. That's a good point, Ryan. Thanks for going over that.
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for just elaborating on that, Ron, because that is a that is a big value point here, right? Management of the scope and the opportunity to add the detailed attributes that contribute to the cost of that particular item, in this case, a drift. So we are now in the hard dollar application, and what I'm going to do is just go through the process that we just explained, right? But where I'm going to pick up in the process is, hey, we've already dumped out from EPS. There's that Excel file that's sitting out there. So I'm going to go ahead and I would create a new project by simply pointing at a new folder here, right? And then as a result, I'm going to have my EPS HD integration project that I've created, right? And just simply titled there. Now we're in the cost breakdown structure of this project, right? So this is where we're going to want to bring in the information that we're bringing in from EPS and 5D Planner, right? So just as the slide showed, we went to this data source drop-down menu, and and as I go through this drop-down process, you can see very clearly we have a specific data source to bring in information through EPS. So once I select that, it's now going to ask me what source, where is this file that you're pointing at, right? So as I went ahead and I've already identified that, then I simply come down and I press import, and then by default it will bring up my window to do the define mapping. But as I mentioned before, it will save your mapping, so instead of every time having to come in and manipulate this, I get that last that opportunity to see, yep, okay, this is perfect, this is how I want to bring the information in. I press OK. Once I press OK, this is just a simple window or message just saying make sure no one else is in the job. We're going to save it. And then in the background, we have now went ahead and brought in the data, right? So just to kind of set the stage for everyone, we've got the description, right? This is a drift, right? What is the ID for that drift? The name of the drift, the quantity, the meter, the load, and the area, right? So one thing that we want to keep in mind is that, remember, from the EPS schedule and 5D planner, this particular this particular drift ID right here is, it was represented in, several different line items. But again, we've rolled that up. It's a single line item, more manageable with our quantities, etc. Now, in addition to that, we also bring in the schedule. Right? So you can see we're bringing in the start and finish dates from EPS. And once, again, this information is in Hard Dollar, one of the things that Ian did mention is that Hard Dollar has the ability to capture all of the different attributes relevant to the project to a specific drift, to make sure that you're capturing all those details that contribute to the cost here. Right? So let's kind of move through the process of adding some more details, because at this point we have scope, we have schedule, and now we want to apply resources. We want to recognize production and help that drive the cost of these drift items. Right? So just keeping it from a very simple standpoint, if I go ahead and I just right-click on that line item and I go down to Insert Assembly, right, what we're doing now is we're accessing Hard Dollar's library or database of different what we call assemblies. Right? Assemblies are just simply a combination of individual resources, whether it's supplies, materials, labor, equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So in this case, I am going to just apply a I'm just going to randomly select this particular assembly, right? And it's going to ask me, do you want to apply to this? I do. And then now that we have this assembly applied, right, and we know this by this plus sign here, I'll expand it out. Here's our assembly. Here are all of the details related to this assembly, right? Everything from, hours per meter, cost for each resource down to the hour, right? So we have that resource assignment. Now it's a matter of, let's go ahead and apply production. Right? So I've just gone to this particular view here where we now have this advance rate column available. So I have my resource, or I've got my scope item, my resource, and then now I can come in and simply type in, the production. Right? So in that case, then it will drive, obviously, cost, right? The total cost of this drift. But I want to spend a few minutes and talk about this advance rate. Right? I took a very easy, simple step to just simply plugging in an advance rate value there. Hard Dollar provides you great flexibility in how you come to that advance rate itself. So what I'm going to do to show you an example is I'm just going to simply just apply an assembly to all of the items. Right? Kind of quickly apply the assembly. Now all of these items here have an assembly on it, and we've got the advance rate column available to go ahead and populate from here. But instead of just plugging in a value, I want to go ahead and drive it from a formula, right? Because we've been in the business long enough to understand that advance rates, you're not sticking your thumb up in the air and coming up with the rate, right? It's a very complex procedure and getting confidence behind your advance rate. So what's that?
At least not everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Good point, Ron, good point. So where I'm going here, folks, is Hard Dollar has an embedded workbook that allows users to apply custom formulas to their to their cost estimate. So in this case, I have this advance rate worksheet, right? And I'm just going to pick from Excel, right? So it automatically brings me to this embedded worksheet, right? That in this case, you know, please don't laugh. This is a very simple example, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is you can have, you know, a formula with several different parameters that come to that ultimate result, right? So as I go ahead and, you know, maybe I'm manipulating those results, that's manipulating, you know, the advance rate, right? Then ultimately what I want to do is I want to link that result of this formula back to hard dollar. So I press that button, I say OK, and, you know, I'm going to now see this 6.75 advance rate. And the nice thing about that, it indicates that, you know, hey, this isn't, you know, you can see the underlying, the link, right? So you know there's more detail behind that. And if you need to have visibility into the detail of that advance rate, you simply click, it will open up, bring you right to that, that worksheet where that formula resides. Right? So to just kind of round out our estimate here, if I just start, you know, moving forward here, and I'm going to, just for sake of time, just plug in some numbers here, right? And then ultimately, as a result of having our scope, our schedule, our resource assignments, our production, we then lead to, you know, having our total cost per drift and total cost for the project at a detailed level. Now, hard dollar has great functionality and capabilities around capturing additional detail. You know, this is a very simple example of how, you know, we can utilize that integration with EPS and 5D Planner to bring in those scope items, take advantage of the functionality in hard dollar, such as applying resources and production and calculating total cost. But there are a lot of other attributes that you can apply to your drifts or to your entire project, you know, such as cost curves and shift arrangements, etc. Right? And one area, in order to get the most accurate cash flow, is around quantities by period. Right? So what I'm going to do is I just double-clicked on that particular drill drift here. We can see our assembly, right? We can see our production. But now where I want to focus is we, as we mentioned earlier, in this particular drill drift, right, it's represented as one line item in hard dollar, but remember, it was multiple items in EPS. And in this case, you know, we can see the quantity by period, right? So that 406 quantity, you know, is represented in each period. And again, this came from EPS. So as a result, what we're going to see next here is we have visibility into cash flow, cost curves, resource utilization, etc. And so I've accessed hard dollar's cash flow module, and we simply have our cost curve or our cost represented in this histogram or line chart. Right? Let it be known that hard dollar's options with this particular module allows you to, you know, report and graph by different time period, right? Month, quarter, year. You can also look at actuals. So as the project begins, you know, you can see your planned cost curve, cost line versus your actual cost line. You can go ahead and break that cost curve down by, you know, maybe rented equipment or labor, right? And in addition to that, we have the concept of graphing and illustrating resource utilization over time, right? So if I go ahead and, you know, press this resource utilization, I've got show me my labor and my rented construction equipment quantity expressed in hours, and do it with a bar chart, right? So if I were to go ahead and you know, add that, we now have, you know, a little bit of a different look. We've got our overall cost curve, but then we have, you know, our labor hours represented in a monthly period, our equipment, rented equipment hours, our cost line, both from labor and equipment. And this is all a result of bringing in the scope information, right, the start and finish dates and quantities by period through or grabbing them from EPS 5D Planner and taking the time to add those additional details such as resources and production, that gives us this cash flow visibility. And so a lot of options around this. This is just a quick example of some of what you can get as a result of detailing out your estimate from hard dollar as a result of bringing over from the EPS. So with that said, let's go ahead and now talk about, well, that's great. We went ahead and we brought in the original design and schedule, but it's been a month and there's been some changes, right? Maybe there's a quantity change, which will obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but in some cases quantity change will affect schedule, but then ultimately it could affect cost, right? We're going to either have to throw some additional resources at it to stay within the schedule restraints to account for those additional quantities, right? Which then may lead to additional cost. So in this particular example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in another update from EPS, but it's going to have updated quantities for this particular drift here, right? So we're going to see the quantity change, and as a result, we're going to see the cost change, right? So if I just go back to data source, go to EPS, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to point at my my file number 2. That's where my updates exist, right? And then once I say import, and again, remember we've got a quantity of 406 here, we've got a cost of 482,000, but after we go through this, 2-click process, we're going to now update our current plan estimate with the new quantities of 470 from 406, and as a result, it's added an additional, I would say, $100,000 in cost due to our current resource assignments and our advance rate. So again, a fairly simple example of how you can streamline and capture and understand the impacts of maybe a design change, a scheduling change through this import process that Hard Dollar and CAE have come together to to provide to the market. So with that said, I will turn it back over to Ron.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to thank you so much, Ryan. That was awesome. We've had some really great questions, and I just want to respond and talk about them real quick. One of the first ones was on the import table that we use, and I know Ryan touched on the fact that it's so much more than just an import too, because it's really a smart import, if you will, recognizing additions, recognizing changes. It's picking up on those things rather than just writing over the content. So it's a pretty sophisticated thing. But somebody asked a question around that, around modifying the tables and reviewing the import table before you bring it in. So if you have different projects that you want to map differently, can I do that? And the answer is yes. You can actually have different import maps for different projects that will handle things differently each and every time. Another question is, can they bring in assemblies or resources when an EPS schedule is brought in?
Yeah, so I think that from that perspective, that's Ian. Could you maybe talk to that particular question?
Bringing in resources and assemblies.
Yeah, so you can put resources in EPS and use resources that way. Typically, what people do with resources in EPS is use them for resource leveling, which is really a scheduling tool. At the moment, there's no mechanism to bring those resource assignments into Hard Dollar, because the assumption is that the resources that you have in EPS are going to be different, are going to be scheduling resources, whereas the resources that you have in Hard Dollar are going to be costing resources.
Very good, yeah. And that makes sense. I mean, and the philosophy here is that Hard Dollar is kind of the centralized platform for those resources, the resource libraries, the updated resource rates. In fact, there's a lot of customers that have an automated updated resource rate process that happens so that Hard Dollar has the resources in the library, vendors change dollar amounts, contractual obligations change in terms of those dollar amounts. Those resource libraries get updated on a nightly basis or a weekly basis. So Hard Dollar is kind of looked at as the central universe for those resources. And but I do understand that I could see the need where somebody may want to say, hey, listen, I've got resources already or assemblies already laid out. Can I leverage those things? But from that perspective, typically that's done in Hard Dollar. Let's go to the next question real quick, which just disappeared. Hold on one second. Let me see if we can bring it back up here for 1 minute. That's all right. I remember. Okay. The task roll-up feature. Can we move back HD updates back to EPS, i.e. write back? So if we're making updates in Hard Dollar, can we roll them back up to EPS? The answer is no. You can't do that right now. Right now, it's with Primavera from a scheduling perspective, we do a back and forth bi-directional integration. What we've chosen to do with CAE right now is to bring that scope in from CAE, bring those scope updates in from EAE, those schedule updates in from CAE, so that the model itself is always owned by CAE. That model is the CAE model. The resources that are associated with it, the costs that are associated with, and ultimately the master schedule, which we didn't touch on today, is tied with Hard Dollar. One of the things that we didn't mention is that, so if I had 16 different projects that I was working on, for example, and I had 16 different projects that I was bringing in models from with CAE, and my design keeps getting updated, I may have the need to then report on that from a portfolio perspective, do all of those projects at one time, and then also roll that up to either a financial schedule or a portfolio schedule that I may even do in Primavera that has nothing to do with the mine itself, but from a financial perspective. So the neat part about this is we're really kind of bridging those systems of record together from that design, from the CAE mine plan into Hard Dollar, rolling it into, from a scheduling perspective, bi-directionally for portfolio management into P6 or Microsoft Project, and then even over to the ERP system for updates to what those costs are, to update the budget, the control budget, the current estimate, current budget, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, bringing actual costs back into Hard Dollar from the ERP system, if there are any, so that we can actually look at what our forecasts are, what our true earned value is, and look at where we're going to wind up. It's a nice little way to tie everything together. And we kind of looked at one piece today because we wanted to focus on what we think is important and why it changes lives if we can integrate the schedule with the mine plan. But there's a lot more, too, that you can do that's pretty neat that integrates into everything else as well. So good question. Thank you for that. Compatibility-wise, will the new version of EPS will it be compatible with the M24D or V12, and will the endorser be required to update to 5DP? From a Hard Dollar perspective, we are recognizing the previous version. So the way we've kind of laid this out is we're really leveraging our Smart Import to do this. So regardless of the layout, we're supporting that integration.
And from our side, what that means is that EPS integrates with both Mine240 version 12 and with Studio 5D Planner. As long as you have the latest version of EPS and you get the Hard Dollar interface, then you will be able to export from either Mine240 V12 or Studio 5D Planner.
Great. Awesome. And I don't think there's any more questions. If there's any more questions, if you want to just put your text thing in there, and if you think of something that maybe you can't think of right now but comes up later, we're going to put the contact information here as well. So please just give us a shout out and give us a call, give us an email. And if you have any other questions that are real specific that maybe you can think of tomorrow that didn't come up today, we're happy to answer. I'm very excited that we had so many people turn out for this. We had over 100 and some odd interested participants today. So I'm excited about the interest and the excitement that we have around kind of putting these things together. But if you have any questions, and I'm sure you will, that don't come up today, let us know about those things. You know, with that, let me share the contact information. Is there a thing on there for that? Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. We'll have the slides on the CAE website as well as the Hard Dollar website that you can check out. If you've got an example project, we'd love to have you submit it, and we'll go ahead and populate that and show you how that works. So please submit an example of a project estimate. We'll schedule a custom demonstration, so we'll actually put the data right in. You can kind of see how this works in real life. You don't have to figure out, hey, will this thing really work? What would it look like? And you don't have to think about it. We'll just kind of show you. So give us a little bit of a sample project. We'll make that happen. And your contact on this is listed there, Greg Wicklander, and his email address is there, gregwicklander@cae.com with 705-626-9425 as a number. Thanks very much for attending today. Well, again, this thing will be posted online, and we look forward to talking to you in the future and extending this out even more. Ian, thanks so much. Ryan, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone, for attending. You can always contact your local office as well. If you're not sure who to contact, just contact Greg, and he'll forward you on to the best person to assist you in your region. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you'll receive a survey, and we'd love to hear your feedback about how this webinar went. And again, look for video and the presentation slide deck on both the CAE and the Hard Dollar website later on. Thanks again, everyone.